Okay, so for now, we will conclude this part of climate science and climate change with this podcast. Andy has some chapter on climate policies and the key considerations. I think practically speaking, everybody is already following their own agenda on climate action, climate policies, and so on. And the good news is that there is various data that shows that the total laws and executive policies around the world have been increasing. So legislative versus executive. If you don't know what that means, don't worry. In some countries like the US, president can issue executive orders without going through the process of going through the Congress and Senate to get the law approved and so on. So there are various levels of executive power that the two branches of legislation have. Nonetheless, there are global governance issues like total emission CO2. So all the parties together have to commit to reducing emissions to go towards the global warming targets like 2 degrees C or 1.5 degrees C warming by 2100 with respect to the pre-industrial level with a 67% probability. And these are obviously changing year by year. So if you look at climate laws and policies around the world in 2018, the map is basically complete other than Greenland and Antarctica, which is not shown here, that every country has some level of climate laws and policies, which is a good thing. So this is from March 2018. You can see the number of climate laws and policies varies. Some countries have many more, like the UK, and this must be France here, and Brazil, and some countries here in Southeast Asia, and so on. And surprisingly, rich countries are not the ones that are having the most legislations and policies, but what does it mean in terms of actual climate action is of course important as well, plus how near-term climate events or disaster like Fukushima in Japan in 2011, check the date, earthquake happened, tsunami damaged a nuclear plant, and Japan got scared, of course, and decided to even switch to coal. And there is some data that they were already hesitating on that. And as I mentioned in the previous podcast, Germany is shutting down its nuclear plants now pretty fast. So all these things can be kind of contradictory with the stated laws and policies. Nonetheless, climate change laws of here from Grantham Institute, this one also I got from Grantham, shows the focus of new laws passed each year to the end of 2017. You can see they cover agriculture and food, disaster risk management, environment as a general category, climate change, low carbon transitions, energy, and mainstreamed into planning. So energy here has become the more dominant focus of laws passed. I keep forgetting the pointer. So you can see the climate change, low carbon transitions have also taken off. And then surprisingly, after the 2015 Paris Agreement, there has been a drop, or it started before that for whatever reason. So I have to look more deeply into that. But we will see soon that there is also the net zero now, which is becoming more and more accepted as a inevitable goal that one has to set for itself as a country. All global warming is local in the sense we are tracking global warming targets of 2 degrees C, 1.5 degrees C. But that doesn't say exactly what that means for what will happen in your backyard. So the impacts in terms of sea level rise, temperature rise, extreme events, cyclones, uh, impact on food production, health, etc., are not going to be locally determined by the global warming, but there is a dynamic distribution. Everybody is shifting towards worsening situation in these sectors like food, energy, water, and health. But within that, you have these more severe risks and less severe risks. So you can also find risk maps, and whether they drive local policies and actions and goals is not so clear. Nonetheless, moving away from Kyoto of 1992, it became obvious that Kyoto didn't work. It was kind of a top-down command and control kind of agreement where rich countries and poor countries were given different targets, and nothing was essentially, not much was accomplished. So Paris Agreement went into a more democratic approach where countries were convinced to submit an intended nationally determined contribution. So then that became nationally determined contribution, not anymore intended. So everybody had to be signing on to monitoring, reporting, and verification phase, which comes up, I think, in 2023. So you can see that the first NDC submitted covers much of the world, and INDC submitted covers a large part of Russia and Asia and Africa here, with some South African countries as well. And there are countries which have not submitted anything, Greenland, of course, and this is this is Syria, I suppose, or Libya, and I have to check it out. And here Libya, here Lebanon, I mean, not Libya. Okay, so once the NDCs were submitted and people calculated the expected emissions reductions from them, looking at the trajectory we are on, it became obvious that we are going to blow past the 2 degrees C warming target, let alone 1.5. Then now there is pressure to submit revised NDCs. So share of emissions covered by NDCs in 2017 shown here. You can see ranges from more than 99% down to less than 20%. So these are the number of countries in terms of 2017 emissions shares. So you can see where India and China are, for example. 80 to 90% of the emissions are covered by NDCs, and they together add 36.4% of the 2017 emissions. So there are many ways to look at it. The point I'm trying to make is that now climate change is pretty much accepted by the world as a big risk that has to be faced as a collective action, and within that there are various tools, command and control and market-based and so on, and innovation expectations that are going to work towards accomplishing the goals of global warming targets. So this is the revised submission. So intends to update NDCs, 20 NDC submitted, and intends to enhance ambition or action in 2020 NDC. So many countries are already beginning to rethink their NDCs and the level of commitment they made. What drives that kind of ambition or action? It's at this point just concern for local, regional climate impacts and a sense of being global, part of the global humanity, I suppose. So you can see that US, Canada, Brazil, India, China, Russia, and many other countries are not applicable in this kind of a map, but you can see large part of Africa have shown intentions to enhance ambition or action in their 2020 NDCs. There is also, excuse me for a second, sorry, somebody came and rang the doorbell. So there is also a climate performance tracking happening on this newclimate.org. Multiple agencies are involved, multiple collaborators are involved. So they consider these sorts of things for evaluating the performance in terms of climate policy. These are the percentages of they take the top emitters, I think top 60 countries, and use these various things to track performance. So greenhouse gas emissions constitute 40% of the considerations. Renewable energy, energy use, and climate policy make up the rest of it. So just as an indicator, you can see that the climate change performance rated is very high for India, and here for, yeah, that's part of India as well. High for some countries, very low for the rich countries like US, Canada, and Australia. Middle East doesn't do so well here as well. Russia always shows up. China is in the low category as well. So this again puts pressure on being more ambitious about action plans and the focus of climate action and investments in innovation, research, etc. Of course, now the new thing, as I mentioned in the Roger Schmittner's book as well, is the race to net zero, carbon neutral goals by countries. Various countries have committed to heading to net zero. So either there are various levels of commitment. So either they are under discussion, proposed legislation already exists, policy these policy documents exist, and this is already into law. And there are two countries, Suriname and Bhutan, are already net zero. So these are all the countries, and you can see that US, for example, committed to a 2050 target. India is not included here. It announced a 2070 target. China aims for 2060 for its net zero. Sweden is earlier at 2045. Who else? So you can just think about this. So the point is that climate action, climate policy, climate into laws, and as I mentioned, Chile rewriting its constitution. So all sorts of actions are being considered, taken up, legislated, or issued as executive orders in a large number of countries, which is good news, at least to start. But again, tracking the overall global emissions, we are still not trending downward or even reducing the rate of increase of total greenhouse gases as of 2021. I am sitting here on January 2nd, January 3rd, 2022. So hopefully this year will do better, and the pandemic is still raging, and pandemic always distracts from other things, obviously, and disasters like Fukushima or other things can have a negative impact on climate action as well. So I'll keep updating these as we go along, but just wanted to give you a glimpse of what the world and humanity is doing about climate in terms of policies, actions, legislations, targets, and so on. Okay, so let's leave this here and move on to Introduction to Climate Modeling, a book by Tom Stoker, as the next section. Okay.